Hello everyone, this is Ben with Bathroom Brews MTG. Today I'm going to be taking a look at the Commander 2011 Precon and ranking every single card that was first printed in this Commander deck. The cards like Sol Ring obviously were printed prior to this, so they're not included. And any of the commanders I'm going to be looking at from the perspective of in the 99, not as commanders, because there really aren't like staple commanders. You can see my rankings on screen here, and you can see a detailed description of all of them in the video description below. Alright, let's get started. First up is Eggcorn Catapult. So this is a 4-mana artifact that you can pay 1 tap, and it deals 1 damage to target creature or player. That creature's controller or that player puts a 1/1 green squirrel creature token onto the battlefield. Alright, so I don't think this card's great. I'm going to put it under niche, and there could be an argument that niche and filler should be swapped in roles, but I'm going to just leave it a niche for now. There probably are some really cute combos you can do with it. Like I'm thinking like Mycosynth and Clock of Omen shenanigans. Overall, I think it's a fun card. Hopefully we get another printing of it so it comes down in price a little bit. I think right now, yeah. Oh, it was on the list, but right now it's like, oh, it's only $3. Okay, that's actually not too bad. Next, Alliance of Arms. This is a 1-mana sorcery with joined forces. Starting with you, each player may pay any amount of mana. Each player puts an X/1/1 white soldier creature token onto the battlefield, where X is the total amount of mana paid this way. This card's not good. I really don't like it, because if you pay 30 mana and someone pays 1, you and that other player both get 31 tokens, which just isn't great. There are still better ways to make tokens, especially now that it's been, what, 12 years since these decks come out? Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of this card. Next up is Amar Soul of Elements, which is Teamer for a 1/1 elemental with pro white and pro black. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you put a +1/+1 counter on Amar, and then creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each counter on Amar. Each +1/+1 counter, I should say. I think this card's actually pretty good, even in like the 99 of decks. As a commander, I like building it as like an artifact storm deck. But just in the 99 of good creature decks, he's great. Next is Archangel of Strife. This is a 7 mana, 5 generic, and a white for a 6/6 flying angel. When it ETBs, each player chooses War or Peace. Creatures controlled by players who choose War get +3/+0. Creatures controlled by players who choose Peace get +0/+3. Yeah, I really don't like this card. It's 7 mana for a 6/6 that also helps your opponents. I mean, no, I'm not here for it. Next up is Avatar of Slaughter, which is an 8 mana, 6 red for an 8/8 Avatar. All creatures have double strike and attack each turn if able. Yeah, the issue is creatures will just attack you. So, and you're giving all your opponent's creatures double strike. No, I'm good. Maybe with sneak attack this could be cool, because you can sneak attack it out, swing in, and then just get rid of it before anyone else gets benefit from it. But I'm not really liking this card. Next up is Bandre Battle Serif. It's a 5 mana 4/4 legendary creature angel. It's 3 red/white, flying. Players can't cast spells during combat, and then red target creature attacks this turn if able. Yeah, again, even in the 99 of like an Boros Angels deck, I think there are just so many better angels at 5 mana. The effect players can't cast spells during combat is pretty cool, but that also means you can't cast spells during combat. And there are a lot of white cards that have this effect asymmetrically, so they'll only affect your opponents and not you. Next up is Celestrial Force. This is an 8 mana 7/7 elemental for 5 white. At the beginning of each upkeep, you gain 3 life? No, sorry. This card's just not good. You get it out on turn 8, even if it's a turn 6, let's be generous. You're gaining maybe 12 life before someone just kills this. And life is a resource, like it doesn't matter if you have 1 life or 100 life generally. And even in life gain decks, I'd rather spend 6 mana to play not this. I'm sorry, 8 mana. Next up is Champion's Helm. It's a 3 mana equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+2. As long as the equipped creature is legendary, it has hexproof for equip 1. I actually like this card. I'm going to put it under niche. I think it's really good in Voltron decks. It was just reprinted, so it should have come down in price quite a bit. Pretty low cost equipment with a cheap equip cost, so I'm pretty happy with this getting a reprint. Oh man, next up is Chaos War. This is 2 and a red for an instant. The owner of target permanent shuffles it into his or her library, then reveals the top card of his or her library. If it's a permanent card, he or she puts it onto the battlefield. I mean, everyone knows Chaos Warp is just an absolute staple. This card, since its first printing here, has been just in every single red deck. I love it. I love taking people's lands away with it if I want to be really mean. overall, just a great card. You should probably play it in pretty much every red deck. You can also use it to shuffle away permanents that you have if they're going to get exiled, so I've used it as a protection spell. Not great, but it can work. Next up is Collective Voyage. This is a 1-mana sorcery with joined forces. Starting with you, each player may pay any amount of mana. Each player searches his or her library for up to X basic land cards, where X is the total amount of mana paid this way, puts them onto the battlefield, and shuffles his or her library. Again, this card isn't great. You know, if you put 5 mana into it and someone puts 1, then each player's going to get 6 mana. It's just not... There are better ways of doing this. This is going in the void. Next up is Command Tower. You add 1 mana to your mana pool of any color in your commander's color identity. All right, we all know what Command Tower does. It's a staple. Any deck that isn't one color, it should be played in. Next up is Crescendo of War, which is a 4-mana enchantment for 3 and a white. At the beginning of each upkeep, you put a Strife counter on it. Attacking creatures get +1/+0 for each Strife counter on it, and blocking creatures you control get +1/+0 for each Strife counter on it. So yeah, I really don't like this card. Attacking creatures, including your opponents, will get a benefit from it, and you only get a benefit if you're blocking. So unless your creatures have first strike, it's not going to matter, but even then, if your opponent's creatures have first strike, no, I don't like it. Next up is Damia Stone, Sage of Stone. This is a 7-mana Sultai commander, 4 green, blue, black, for a 4/4 with Death Touch. You skip your draw step. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have fewer than 7 cards in your hand, you draw cards equal to the difference. This card's, I think, probably niche. I'll put it like here. It's cool because it's a upkeep trigger. So if you have ways of like getting additional upkeep steps, you could do stuff, I think, in response to this, because you would get priority at that point, and then draw 7. And then if you have another upkeep step, you can do some more stuff. So there might be some weird upkeep instant speed shenanigans you can do. But otherwise, I think this is a good as a commander, not so much in the 99. Next is Death by Dragons. This is a 6-mana 4-red sorcery. Each player other than target player puts a 5/5 red dragon creature token with flying onto the battlefield. I don't know why you would want to play this. I guess if you really want to single somebody out, you could. But again, you're giving other players 5/5s, and you don't really want to be doing that. Next is, I'm going to mispronounce this, and comment section, please forgive me. Dread Coco Demon? Coco Demon. Dread Coco Demon is what we're calling it. It's 10 mana for 7 black for an 8/8. When it ETBs, if you cast it from your hand, destroy all creatures your opponents control, then untap all other creatures you control. I kind of want to put that... I'm going to put that in niche, right? Because you don't have to pay mana to cast. It's just so long as you cast it. And while it is 10 mana, it's not like Big Black isn't a deck where you have Cabal Coffers or board Cabal Stronghold. So it's not like it's hard to get 10 mana. And it's a one-sided board wipe that then untaps all of your creatures. Yeah, maybe I'll put it in filler. I think it might be a good filler card. Like if you want to play it, do it. But otherwise, you could probably replace it with a better board wipe. Yeah, I'll put it there. Next is Edric Spymaster of Trust. This is a 3-mana 2/2. When a creature deals damage to one of your opponents, its controller may draw a card. This is great in any Simic deck or any just like combat deck. It does help your opponents because they'll draw cards, but it will incentivize them to smash into each other and not you, which is great. Next up is Fluster Storm. This is a 1-mana instant. Counter target instant or sorcery spell unless its controller pays 1. This is a great card. I don't think it's necessarily a staple because I don't think you want to play it in every single blue deck, but I definitely think it should be played in if you're a higher powered deck or higher powered like play group. It's really good, and if you're a Storm deck, I would definitely recommend it. Next is Gave, Guru of Spores. This is 2 and an Abzan for a 0/0. It ETBs with 5+1/+1 counters. You can pay 1, remove one of those counters, or remove a +1/+1 counter from a creature you control. You can put a Saproling into play, and you can pay 1, sack a creature, and put a counter on target creature. This goes infinite with a ham sandwich. It's great. Love this card. Next is the land Homeward Path. So you can tap, add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool, or tap, each player gains control of all creatures he or she owns. Honestly, I think this should be a staple. I'm gonna put it at the high end of great. I think this is really meta dependent. If you have a play group that has a lot of like theft effects, I would probably put it there. But I think otherwise it's a great card. If you're a monocolor deck, you should probably include it as just a colorless utility land. Yeah, I'm happy with it. Next up is Hornet Queen. So this is also, I didn't realize this was the first printing of Hornet Queen. It's 4 green, green, green for a 2/2 flying death touch. When it ETBs, you make 4 1/1 green insect creature tokens with flying and death touch. I'm gonna put this card. I think a few years ago I would have put it in great. I'm gonna put it like the top end of niche. I think token decks really want it, but there are better green threats, especially for 7 mana at this point. It is still a really fun card to like flicker, so I'll put it there. I'll put it under niche. Next up is Hydra Omnivore. This is a 6 mana 8/8. When it deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to each other opponent. Yeah, I'll put that in niche. I mean, it's because it has to be specifically combat damage, but this is great in like a mono green Hydra deck. If you can suit it up and like crack in or just give it trample, you're not going to be mad at that. And next up is Kalia of the Vast. This is a 1 and a Mardu. Red, black, and white for a 2/2 flying human cleric. I thought she was an angel. Whenever she attacks an opponent, you may put an angel, demon, or dragon card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped and attacking that opponent. Yep, if you're in these colors and you're playing one of those decks, I would definitely say put her in. Amazing card. Next up is Kador Ghost Chieftain. This is an 8 mana 3/4. They cost less. They cost 1 less to cast for each creature card in your graveyard. During each of your turns, you may cast 1 creature from your graveyard. This card's pretty good. I guess I'm struggling if I should put these commanders up here in niche because they're in like very specific archetypes. Yeah, I think I'm gonna do that. I think I'm actually going to move this down. I think we're gonna put these more in niche because I feel like they're not just like great in generic decks, but they're good in their exact like archetypes. And I think this card, I'll leave this here. I'll put it above Eggcorn. I think we'll do something like this. Yeah, because great are cards that are more good in pretty much every deck, but these I think are more niche, where you want these in specific decks. We'll see where the filler ends up. I might move Damia down. All right, let's get back on track here. Next up is Magnetic Force. It's 5 red, red, red for a 7/7. At the beginning of each upkeep, it deals 3 damage to target creature or player. I love this card. But again, I think it's definitely a niche card. You want to play being like a big red burn deck. It's great in Heb. You're playing the new 9th Doctor, which I just did a video on last week. You should check that out. It'd be really good in there because you're getting multiple upkeep steps. It is Mana Charge Dragon. This is a 6 mana 5/5 flying trample. Join forces. Whenever it attacks or blocks, each player starting with you may pay any amount of mana. It gets +X/+O until end of turn, where X is the total amount of mana paid this way. I actually like this card. Maybe I'll put it at the tail end of like a filler. Yeah, I'm gonna put it in a filler card. Like, you could probably cut this from your dragon deck, but it seems really fun, especially if you're trying to one-shot the arch enemy, or if everyone agrees to put in a ton of mana, you can just immediately one-shot someone. I think that's really fun. Next up is Martyrs Bond. This is 4 white, white for an enchantment. Whenever it or another non-land permanent you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a permanent that shares a card type with it. This is tough because I feel like it's probably niche. I want to put it in great, but I think I'm going to put it in niche here. I'll put it like here. Because you really do want to be playing this in more of like a sacrifice deck because it's non-land, so it's not like you can do any like land shenanigans with it. So yeah, I'm gonna put it kind of in the middle of niche here. Next up is Minds Aglow. This is a 1 mana sorcery with join forces. Starting with you, each player may pay any amount of mana. Each player will draw X cards, where X is the total amount of mana paid this way. So actually, I'm going to put this one more in filler. Filler, tail end of niche. The only reason this one is going here compared to the others is if you're building a blue deck, you can build with like Narset, Orcish Bowmasters, or any of those cards that hurt people from drawing, or even like Nekusar. This is actually a good card because your opponents probably don't want to draw 10 cards if they're going to take 10, 15, 20 damage. Next up is Nin the Pain Artist. This is a 2 mana 1/1 that has legendary Vidalcan Wizard. You pay X and tap it. It deals X damage to target creature. That creature's controller draws X cards. It's filler. I think it's fine. It's good in like card draw decks, but I think especially now with how much power creeping we've had, there's better ways to do this. Next up is Riddle Keeper. This is a 3-mana 1/4 Homunculus. Whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, that creature's controller puts the top 2 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. Yeah, I don't really like this card. I'm putting it in a Void. I'll put it like the top end of a Void. So many decks at this day and age can get stuff out of the graveyard that milling 2 for an attack doesn't really matter. And it could also even just be beneficial. Like I have a Tormod deck that I make a bunch of zombies, and if I'm milling 14 cards when I attack you with 7 zombies, I'm in because I want stuff in the yard. Next up is Rku of Two Reflections. This is a 5-mana 2/2 Teamer commander. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may pay Izzet. If you do, you copy that spell. And whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay Simic, and you can put a token copy of that creature onto the battlefield. It's specifically cards that you cast, so you can't steal opponents' things. However, it is a really good niche commander, especially if you're in like the right deck for it. It's actually, no, I take that back. I'm gonna put him in filler. I've played this card a number of times, and it feels really clunky compared to a lot of the options we have today. I think there are better copy spells, and there are better like non-token creature copiers. Like Bramble Sovereign does this for 1 and a green and is 4 mana. This card is better as a commander than in the 99. Next up is Rayon of the Fumari. This is 1 and a Jeskai for a 7/7. At the beginning of combat on your turn, choose an opponent at random. It attacks that opponent this combat if able. It's not a great card. I know Sheldon Mannery had a deck with it. So that's pretty cool. And I've seen a couple decks with it. Overall, in the 99 of Jeskai decks, I would avoid it. As a commander, though, it's really fun. Next up is Scavenging Ooze. This is 1 and a green for a 2/2. You pay a green, exile target card from a graveyard. If it was a creature card exiled this way, you put a +1/+1 counter on it and gain a life. I think this is a staple. Yeah, I'm gonna put it at the tail end of staples. I think if you're in a green deck, you should be playing Scavenging Ooze. It's really good graveyard hate. Even with like Lion Sash. Lion Sash I think is better than Scooz, but Scooz is still a really good card that you should be putting in a lot of your green decks. Next up is Scythe Spectre, not Scyther Spectre. It's a 4 black for a 4/4 flying specter, so 6 mana. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, each opponent discards a card. Each player who discarded a card with the highest converted mana cost among cards discarded this way loses like equal to that converted mana cost. I'm gonna put it in a filler. I think this is fine, but if people know what it does or they have cards in hand, they're gonna just pitch the lowest costed card. Or they'll just discuss like, oh hey, I'll pitch the highest one this time if you can pitch it next time. Yeah, it's fine. If you can get this Myriad though, that's fun. All right, next up is Sewer Nemesis. It's 3 and a black for a star. When it enters the battlefield, choose a player. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in that player's graveyard. Whenever the chosen player casts a spell, that player puts the top card of his or her library into his or her graveyard. I'm gonna put this under filler also. I think there are better options. You can target yourself with it because it doesn't say opponent, so this is the only reason why I'd put it under instead of a void, because you can target yourself and mill yourself with it. But I think there are just better ways to mill yourself. Next up is Shared Trauma. It's a 1 black sorcery with Joined Forces. So starting with you, each player may pay any amount of mana. Each player puts the top X cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, where X is a total amount of mana paid. Again, I would just say avoid this card. You know, if you're playing a graveyard deck, you can mill yourself pretty efficiently. You don't want to give other people who might be playing graveyard decks the option to mill themselves. Next up is Skullbriar with a Walking Grave. So it's a Golgari, so black-green for a 1/1 haste. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you put a counter on it. And then counters remain on Skullbriar as it moves to any zone other than a player's hand or library. I'm going to put this under niche. I'm going to maybe put it like, maybe here. This like middle is like kind of tight. Like they're all pretty much around the same for me. But Skullbriar is great because keyword counters are a thing now. So you got to keep those on them. Which is the only reason why it's up here instead of like maybe under filler. As a commander though, it is pretty good. I've seen a lot of Skullbriar decks do pretty well. Next up is Soul Snare. This is a 1-mana enchantment. You pay 1, Sacket Exile target creature that's attacking you or a planeswalker you control. Again, just another like more niche card. I think this is like one of the better niche cards because it's a 1-mana enchantment. So while it's definitely telegraphed, it is 2 mana to exile something that attacks you or a planeswalker you control. So it's definitely worse than Path or Swords. However, in enchantment decks, you really want this because it is a cheap enchantment that'll cantrip you. And if you have ways of making copies of it, you can kind of have enough of these just to protect your face or your planeswalkers for a little bit. Next up is Spell Crumble. It's 1 blue for 3 mana, instant target counter spell. If a spell would be countered this way, you put it on the bottom of its owner's library instead of that player's graveyard. Put Spell Crumble on the bottom of your library. Just don't play this. Do not play this card. It is a bad counter spell. It's cancel with essentially downside, right? Because if someone's has any tutors in the deck, they can just get the spell back. And you really don't want to be recurring cancel. Yeah. Maybe in the new there's a Doctor Who commander that lets you play stuff from the bottom of your library. In that one exact deck, this card is actually good. River Song. This card is actually good in River Song. Anywhere else, I would not play it. Next up is Strangle Hold. This is a 3 and a red for 4 mana for a red enchantment. Your opponents can't search libraries. If your opponent would begin an extra turn, that player skips that turn instead. Honestly, this is a great card. I don't know how much it is right now. I think, okay, so it's $6 right now. So it could really use like a reprint. I think if this was a little bit cheaper, I would probably put this in a lot of my red decks just to turn off fetches, evolving wilds, any sort of like land ramp for green. It's the extra turns is the icing on top, but I don't personally have a lot of extra turn decks in my meta, so this is more just to prevent people from searching. Next up is Siphon Flesh. It's a 5 mana sorcery. Each other player sacrifices a creature. Then you put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield for each creature sacrificed this way. I'm between Avoid and Filler. I think it's Filler. I don't think you have to avoid this card, but it's an edict, so people just sacrifice a token and you get a 2/2. So it's 6 mana, get with 3 players, with 3 opponents rather. You would get 3 2/2, so it's 6 mana for 6 power and toughness, which is fine. But it's a sorcery, so you can't even hold it up, so Next up is Tyrell, Reckoner of Souls. This is 4 and a Mardu, so 7 mana for a 4/7 Flying Vigilant Angel. You tap, choose a creature card at random from target opponent's graveyard. Put that card onto the battlefield under your control. Niche, I guess. If you can cheat it out with either Kalia or sneak attack it out to give it haste to tap and like get a random creature, that's great, but it is random, so if they have a Landward Elf in their graveyard, you might get that over, let's say, a Craterhoof. I think as a commander, it's just too expensive mana-wise, so I'm gonna put it under niche. It might go under filler. I'm still on the fence about it. Next up is the Mimeoplasm. This is 2 in Sultai for a 0/0. As it ETBs, you may exile 2 creature cards from graveyards. If you do, it enters the battlefield as a copy of one of those creatures, with a number of +1/+ additional +1/+1 counters on it equal to the power of the other card. As a commander, I love this. My friend has a Mimeo deck I helped him with. It's really strong. In the 99 of a deck, it's technically graveyard hate. So I'm going to put it like here. Because it is graveyard hate and Sultai for 5 mana. You do get to exile 2 creatures from someone's graveyard. That's cool, but Next up is Trench Gorger. This is an 8 mana 6/6 with trample. When it ETBs, you search your library for any number of land cards, exile them, then shuffle your library. If you do, its power and toughness become equal to the number of cards exiled this way. All right, this is going at the tail end of... this is tough. I don't know if I want to put it in niche or filler, right? Because it is a really powerful card, and you can combo it with, like, Thassa's Oracle. But I don't think it's good enough. Yeah, it's going to go here. My friend plays it in their Kiora deck, the new Kiora from Aftermath. And it's funny there when they get rid of all of their lands and we don't have removal for this. But oftentimes the table will just kind of team up and make sure this thing never untaps, and then they have no lands left. Next is Tribute to the Wild. It's a 1 and a green instant. Each opponent sacrifices an artifact or enchantment. Sure. It's bad removal. If you want to play it, you can. No, I'm gonna actually put it in Void. Don't play this card. It's awful. Unless I have one enchantment or one artifact, but 99% of the times you're better off just playing a... I guess it is 3. Hold on. You are removing 3 things for 2 mana at instant speed. I'll put it here, actually. In terms of efficiency, if each opponent has a thing, that's great. And if they only have 1, like they're just using Soul Ring or whatever, that's, you know what? Honestly, try this card. It might not be bad. Might not be great, but might not be bad. Next is Vishkal Blood Arbiter. This is an 7-mana Orzhov 5/5 flying lifelinking vampire. You sack a creature, you put X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is a sacrifice creature's power. Then you can remove all the counters from it, and target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn for each counter removed this way. Again, a great niche card. I actually really like them in like aristocrats decks, like especially budget ones that are a little bit slower. Faster ones, I think you want Ashnod's Altar, Phyrexian Altar, Altar of Dementia, like those kind of sack outlets. But for more budget decks, even though it is 7 mana, it's still great. And I also like it a lot in my oh, what's the Orzhov legend from Ratadrabik? I like this in my Ratadrabik deck. Oh my lord, it's been a long day. So yeah. Next up is Vow of Duty. This is a 3-mana enchantment aura. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2, has vigilance, and can't attack you or a planeswalker you control. Yeah, this is another like niche card. This is really good in Ariette because it can attack you, so it's a little bit better than Goad in a 1v1, but it's not as good as Goad, I think, when it's multiple players, because you want that creature to be attacking. But if it can't attack you, that's just added upside. And that's pretty much all the Vow cycle. So Vow of Flight, same thing, 3-mana enchantment. It gets +2/+2 and has flying and can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. But not attacking planeswalkers you control is also really big, especially when it gets to a 1v1. Pretty much all the Vows. So Vow of Lightning's the same thing, but it gives +2/+2 in first strike. Again, I'm just going to kind of put it here. Vow of Malice, same thing, but it gets Intimidate, which can be actually, I'm going to put it up a little bit higher than the other ones, because if there's no black or artifact creatures out, you just, I think that's how that works. Or is that Fear? I think that's Intimidate. You're pretty happy. And then Vow of the Wilderness is +2/+2 and Trample. I think I like, I think like this. I think Intimidate, Flying and Trample is close. I'm going to give it to Flying, then Trample, then Vigilance, and First Strike. And then finally is Zerdu the Greatheart. This is 4 mana, 1 and a Jeskai for a 2/4. At the beginning of your upkeep, you gain X life and draw X cards, where X is a number of permanents you own that target opponent controls. You pay Jeskai, so red, white, blue. Target opponent gains control of a target permanent you control. This card in the right deck is like really good. I think it's better as a commander. If you put this in the ninth Doctor Jeskai like gifts deck, that could be really funny as a hidden commander, because you can get multiple upkeeps. So you can gain, 2, 3, 4 life, or even actually has more than that, right? You give someone has like 2 permanents or 3 permanents, you can gain like 9 life, draw 9 cards. And that's it for the list. So yeah, we have a lot of more like niche cards here, which I think is fine. You don't want every single commander deck to be chocked full of staples. There are some great cards, but 3 primary staples we've gotten were Command Tower, Chaos Warp, and Scavenging Ooze. So yeah, that's the list. If you let me know in the comments what you think of my list, if you agree with me, if you don't agree with me, and if you want to see more of this content, give this video a like. It really helps out the channel. All right, I'll see you guys next week or the week after. I don't know how often I'm gonna be doing these. Let me know actually also in the comments how often you want these. I'm thinking about doing them weekly up until we're caught up on all the commander decks, which will be about a year. But yeah, all right, see ya.